Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to be giving you 10 tips to learn piano 10 times faster. So, tip number 1, train hands, head and heart. Every time you sit down at the piano to practice, it's useful to have a routine. And that routine should always include these 3 things. So the first one is hands, and this includes any kind of technical things like practicing scales or practicing other exercises. This will help with your general ability to physically play the piano. And every time you sit down to practice, you should at least do something that helps with your general technique. The second part to this is head. This includes your understanding of music and how to play the piano. So this includes things like sight reading and light music theory. And the last part is heart, and this is all about musicality and playing pieces. The reason I would break down practice like this is because if you think about it in this way, when you're learning your pieces, your focus will be more on the musicality and how it should sound rather than worrying about the technique or about your reading of the music. And it's important when playing the piano to make sure that you are concentrating on making something sound good. Having said this leads me into tip number 2, and this is problem solve. The temptation when practicing piano and the easy way out is to just play things through and hope that it eventually gets better. But unfortunately that's not really how it works. If you have a problem within a song or a piece that you are playing, the only way that problem is going to get fixed is if you focus on fixing the problem. Now that sounds obvious, but I have done this myself and I've seen lots of people do this, where you play through a problem and you think, I will come back to that later, and you never do. So my advice here would be to create a list of problems and pieces as you go through it, or to not play things through and only focus on areas that are challenging. Tip number 3, practice frequently rather than in bulk. So what I mean by this is don't go to the piano and sit there for 2 hours on one day of the week and say, that's great, I've done loads of practice. What you should be doing is revisiting the piano, because it actually helps going away from the piano and coming back with a fresh mind and having done something else. So if you are there with one problem in a piece that just doesn't seem to be getting any better, leave it, concentrate on something else and come back to it tomorrow. But make sure you do come back to it tomorrow and don't leave it another week. This is why if you do a large practice session, yes, you may be spending a lot of time on each of the problems, but then if you are not revisiting it frequently, it's not going to get any better. Tip number 4, accept imperfection. So once again, it's very easy to get frustrated sitting at the piano, not being able to play something. If you are an adult learner, the problem is that you understand how to do something, but getting your hands to actually do that is a different thing. And you've got to understand that it's not going to be perfect straight away, and what you're doing is you're taking the information that you already know and you're applying that to how you're actually going to play it. And frustration won't help this process. A slow and deliberate practice will help this. The way that we learn motor skills is by getting our brain to form connections over synaptic gaps. And the more times we repeat a process, the more time our brain becomes familiar with it, and the connection between your head and your hands becomes stronger. So if you understand this information, that should help you realise that it's not you that's making the mistake, it's just the process you've got to go through. And this is why you should accept things not being perfect straight away. Tip number 5, set goals. Once you're past that initial period of learning the piano where you are very committed and motivated to learn, as with anything in life, it can be very hard to keep yourself motivated. So this tip comes in 2 parts. The first one is set yourself a routine so that it just becomes habit, but also give yourself something to work towards, be that doing a grade or a performance or just playing to your family. You could even record yourself today and record yourself in 3 months. And just knowing that you're going to play in 3 months to a recording might be enough to motivate you to prove to yourself that you've improved. Tip number 6, quantify success. Now obviously piano is a subjective and qualitative instrument. There isn't a yes or no to how good you play. However, in day-to-day practice there are objective things that you know you need to fix and that your teacher, if you have one, knows that you need to fix. And you can write these down in a checklist. Having this objective checklist to go down every time you practice will really help focus your practice and help you improve so much faster. Tip number 7, relax. This goes back to my earlier tip of accepting imperfection. There is a temptation to force something when you're not getting it right, and you're trying to force your hand to do something that it's not ready to do. And this can lead to tension, and not only can that affect the health of your long-term playing, but it also leads to a sound that is not the sound that you're going to want when you've learnt the piece or the song that you're learning. So you should always practice with the intention of making it sound how you want it to sound. And this will all stem from just playing very relaxed and concentrate on listening rather than the physicality of playing. Tip number 8, theory and improvisation. Now these kind of go hand in hand because theory is the understanding of music in general, whereas improvisation is the application of theory. And improvisation especially is often neglected. However, if you want to be a well-rounded musician and you want to be ready for any situation, then improvisation is a great way to learn. So I'd recommend, if you have never studied any music theory or improvisation before, then just start with learning chords and maybe learning scales, and then have a go at using those on the piano. Improvisation always stems from finding sounds that you like, and eventually you build up a catalogue of sounds that you like, and you have a full range that you can use with your improvisation. Tip number 9, practice detail and not duration. So once again, this is similar to some of the points I've already made, but you need to be concentrating on small sections in pieces and songs, or things that you can't do, and not focusing on how long you're practicing for or how much of the piece that you're learning. If you tell yourself, I'm going to practice half an hour a day, that half an hour could be really effective, or it might not be. And ultimately, the aim should be to try and increase how efficient you are with your practice, opposed to how long you're practicing for. If I could learn a piece in 1 minute a day, I would do it. So focus on targeted details in pieces to fix those, because those are where the problems are, rather than focusing on playing it through or spending a set amount of time sitting at the piano. This can also decrease motivation if you find that you're forcing yourself to sit at the piano for longer than you need to. And tip number 10, perform. Performing is a broad thing to say, but the key here is to put yourself under just a little bit of pressure. When in a performing situation where you feel like you have to play something from start to finish in front of someone, it will never go as it goes in practice. But the more you perform, the closer you can get to being comfortable with how you play in front of people, and it will improve your overall ability, not just when performing, but also in being efficient with your practice, because it will highlight things in a more stressful situation that you aren't thinking about when you're in a relaxed situation. Performing is also a very good measure of how well you are doing, because unless you are a performer, performances tend to be infrequent, and you can remember how good you were last time you performed and how good you are this time you performed. Because of the stressful situation, it's more of a memorable experience. So those are my 10 tips to learn piano 10 times faster. If you have any tips for learning piano faster, then leave those in the comments, and if you found this video useful, then hit me with a like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.